Unit 2, Crimes Against Persons, 721.1, determine if an incident is assault or aggravated assault, misdemeanor, intentional unlawful threat via word or act creates well-founded fear the violence is imminent and suspect has the apparent ability to carry it out. Aggravated assault, which is a felony, all assault elements are met, plus the assault is made with a deadly weapon without intent to kill, or made with intent to commit a felony. 721.2, determine if an incident is battery or aggravated battery. Battery, which is a misdemeanor, intentionally touching, striking a victim against their will or intentionally causing bodily harm. Aggravated battery, which is a felony, committing battery and intentionally or knowingly causing great bodily harm, permanent disability, permanent disfigurement, or using a deadly weapon. It also applies if the victim is pregnant and the suspect knew or should have known. 721.3, determine if an incident is felony battery, requires intentionally touching or striking a victim against their will and causing significant injury, great bodily harm, permanent disability, or permanent disfigurement without a conscious intent to cause great bodily harm. It also applies if the suspect has one prior conviction for battery or aggravated battery and commits a subsequent battery. Includes domestic battery by strangulation. 721.4, describe how to respond to assault or battery. Focus on officer safety and de-escalate tensions. Determine if a crime occurred based on elements and identify instrumentalities, hands, weapon, object. If a threat exists but no crime occurred, consider a risk protection order or RPO per agency policy. 721.5, determine when an assault or battery charge merits reclassification or a change in the degree of the offense. Reclassify if the victim is 65 or older, or a specified worker performing official job duties. Example, school employee, sports official, EMS provider, firefighter, public transit worker, criminal justice or law enforcement officer, and the suspect knew or should have known their status. Jail, correctional, reclassification applies if an inmate expels bodily fluids, blood, saliva, urine, or feces at a facility employee to harass or alarm them. 721.6, describe when you can make a warrantless arrest for assault or battery. Assault, warrantless arrest is allowed if it occurs in your presence, occurs in a domestic violence situation, or is committed upon a law enforcement officer, a firefighter, EMS provider, or public transit employee. Battery, allowed if there is probable cause, such as physical evidence or sworn statements, to believe a misdemeanor battery has been committed and the accused is the perpetrator. 722.1, determine when an incident meets the criteria for domestic violence. The offense must match specified crimes such as assault, battery, stalking, kidnapping, false imprisonment, etc., resulting in physical injury or death. The parties must be family or household members who currently live together or have lived together in the past in a single dwelling unit, except for parents who share a child in common who do not need to have cohabited. 722.2, determine the abuser in a domestic violence incident. Separate the parties to obtain statements. Compare statements to physical evidence and injuries. For example, look for defensive wounds on forearms, palms, back of legs. Assess patterns of coercion, economic abuse, destruction of phones or security devices, emotional states, and past history of violence to identify the primary aggressor. 722.3, determine when an incident meets the criteria for dating violence. Look for a romantic or intimate relationship within the past 6 months, characterized by expectations of affection or sexual involvement, and a continuous frequency of interaction over time. Victim consent is not required to investigate or arrest. 722.4, describe how to respond to a domestic violence incident. Approach safely, higher danger window, check for weapons and prior histories, de-escalate, separate parties, interview witnesses or children, and look for observable scene evidence if parties are uncooperative. Arrest the primary aggressor if probable cause exists. If no probable cause exists, explain safety options, legal brochures, and arrange transport to a shelter if requested. 722.5, describe how to document evidence in a domestic violence incident. Carefully photograph and document all physical evidence, injuries, property damage, or explicitly note the lack thereof. Return within 24 to 48 hours if necessary to capture delayed bruising or progressive injury evidence. 722.6, describe the role of a no contact order. Prohibits oral or written communication, physical contact, or presence within 500 feet of the victim's home, car, or workplace. It is a pre-trial release condition. Officers can make a warrantless arrest if a suspect violates it after a domestic violence arrest. 722.7, describe the role of an injunction in a domestic violence incident. A civil order whose violation has criminal consequences. Florida honors out-of-state injunctions. If a custody dispute arises within an injunction, it remains civil unless a criminal condition is violated. Warrantless arrests are permitted for criminal violations of protection injunctions. 722.8, describe how to respond to parent domestic violence. Interview the child and family to see if it is an isolated event. Refer families to local interventions or counseling, like the Florida Network of Youth and Family Services. Arrange a temporary respite home to let them, quote unquote, cool off, or make an arrest based on the risk level of harm. 722.9, describe how to document a domestic violence incident. Florida law mandates a written report for any allegation of domestic violence. If an arrest is not made, you must clearly document the reason why to avoid agency liability. Send a copy of the report to the nearest certified domestic violence center within 24 hours. 723.1, determine if an incident is stalking. Document that the suspect willfully, maliciously, and repeatedly followed, harassed, or cyberstalked the victim. Malicious intent means doing so wrongfully and without justification, knowing it will cause injury or damage. 723.2, determine if an incident is aggravated stalking. All elements of stalking must be met, plus the suspect makes a quote-unquote credible threat that places the victim in reasonable fear for their safety or the safety of family or friends. 723.3, to determine if an incident is cyberstalking. Engaging in a course of electronic communication such as email, text, social media, words, or images directed at a specific person that causes substantial emotional distress and serves no legitimate purpose. 723.4, describe how to respond to stalking. Interview the victim regarding frequency and methods. Secure evidence via screenshots of text, social media pages, or physical copies of notes. Do not touch electronic devices directly to avoid destroying data. Notify a supervisor or specialized detective for assistance. 724.1, determine if an incident is child abuse or aggravated child abuse. Child abuse. Knowingly or willfully inflicting physical or mental injury on a child under 18, committing an act reasonably expected to cause injury, or actively encouraging another to do so. Corporal punishment is lawful unless it crosses into malicious, substantial harm. Aggravated child abuse. Committing aggravated battery on a child, willfully torturing, maliciously punishing, willfully or unlawfully caging, or causing great bodily harm or disfigurement. 724.2, determine if an incident is child neglect. A caregiver's gross and deliberate failure to provide essential food, nutrition, clothing, shelter, medicine, or medical services necessary to maintain physical or mental health, or failure to protect the child from exploitation or abuse. 724.3, explain the difference between child abandonment and surrendering an infant. Abandonment. Caregiver makes no contribution to a child's care and fails to maintain a positive relationship. Surrendering an infant. Lawful exception allowing a parent to leave an infant 30 days old or younger at a baby safe haven, such as a hospital, ER, fire, or EMS station, with intent to leave anonymously. Officers may not pursue or follow a parent surrendering an infant. 724.4, describe an incident of abusive head trauma. A traumatic brain injury to an infant or child under 6 caused by violent shaking or blunt impact. Once EMS assumes medical care, the officer's role is to conduct the criminal investigation, remaining objective even if caregivers appear forthcoming or claim it was an accident. 724.5, determine if an incident is contributing to the delinquency or dependency of a child. Document an act that caused, encouraged, or contributed to a child under 18 becoming delinquent, dependent, or in need of services. Includes a person 21 or older impregnating a child under 16, regardless of consent. 724.6, describe how to respond to child abuse, neglect, or abandonment. Assess injuries and ensure immediate medical treatment. Escort and provide security for a child protective investigator or CPI from DCF. Preliminary interviews should lock in parent statements. Call the DCF abuse hotline at 800-962-2873 if immediate danger or abandonment is suspected. 724.7, separate the victim of child abuse or neglect from the suspected abuser. Physically separate the child from the alleged abuser, out of earshot and sight to prevent further harm or intimidation. Observe interaction dynamics and fear responses within the room. 724.8, describe how to document child abuse, neglect, and abandonment. Document all incidents regardless of whether an arrest occurs. Keep the identity of the reporting person confidential within the report. Do not include the CPI's personal identifying information, such as date of birth or home address, due to statutory confidentiality protections. 725.1, determine if an incident is abuse or aggravated of an elderly person or disabled adult. Abuse, knowingly, willfully inflicting physical or psychological injury, committing acts expected to cause injury, encouraging such acts, or unlawfully isolating them from family to cause harm or conceal crime. Aggravated abuse, committing aggravated battery, willfully torturing, maliciously punishing, caging, or causing great bodily harm or permanent disfigurement. And 725.2, determine if an incident is neglect of an elderly person or disabled adult, a caregiver's willful failure to provide essential food, shelter, supervision, or medicine necessary for physical or mental health, or failure to protect them from exploitation or abuse. Caregivers include relatives, neighbors, facility staff, or court-appointed guardians. 725.3, determine if an incident is exploitation of an elderly person or disabled adult. A suspect takes or attempts to take a victim's property or assets, or abuses a special fiduciary relationship like power of attorney, to seize funds, causing financial or physical hardship. Treat as a criminal matter, not a family civil issue. 725.4, determine if the elderly person or disabled adult is in immediate danger of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. Look for signs of trauma such as bruises or burns. Check for hidden environmental signs, smells of urine or feces on the person, rotting food, empty refrigerators, or a lack of regular medical care. Contact your supervisor if immediate danger is found. 725.5, differentiate the officer's role from the adult protective investigator's role. API's role conducts a social services investigation, makes determinations on protective custody placements, and can execute emergency forcible entry or removal if a risk of death or injury exists. Officer's role is to conduct the criminal investigation, to determine if a crime occurred, maintain the safety for the API, and provide statutory transport if needed. 725.6, describe how to interview the people involved when conducting an initial investigation of abuse, neglect, or exploitation of an elderly person or disabled adult. Be sensitive, clear, and patient. Physically separate the victim from the suspect. Evaluate and document if necessary. Evaluate and document if memory, capacity, or communication are impaired. Do not stop the investigation if a potentially unduly influenced victim claims they quote-unquote consented to the activity. Interview the caregiver to lock in their statement. 725.7, describe how to respond to abuse, neglect, and exploitation of an elderly person or disabled adult. Assess injuries and coordinate with the API for the victim's safety. Advise victims or guardians on filing exploitation or domestic injunctions. Provide referrals to the Florida Senior Legal Helpline or Disability Rights Florida.